Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Quarterback Dadcast. This is season 6, and this is the first episode of season 6. We were recording in December, but this episode will come out in January. And so, Happy New Year to everybody. I can't really say it now, but when you listen to it, you're going to say Happy New Year because it's the first episode in January. So, I'm excited for our next guest for a couple reasons. One, I just realized before we started recording that he is classmates with a former colleague of mine named Verge, the one and only Verge Palumbo, he's a Marine. Our next guest is a Naval Academy stud. His name's Drew Wolff. He's the chief financial officer of Boeing Employees Credit Union. And I was graciously introduced to Drew and his team from my college teammate Dan Wadley, who is also a former guest on the podcast. And Drew and team was nice enough to have me in to speak at one of their events, which was so fun. I met a ton of people, and Drew also introduced a book to me called Turn That Ship Around by David Marquette, which I loved. I read it quickly. So if you guys are looking for a new book to read. But with all that said, that's not why we're having Drew on today. We're having Drew on today to learn about Drew, the dad, and how he's working hard to become that ultimate quarterback or leader of his household. So without further ado, Mr. Wolff, welcome to the Quarterback Dadcast.
Thank you. Really honored to be here.
Cool. Well, we always start out each episode with gratitude. So tell me, what are you most grateful for as a dad today?
Pretty standard. I'm grateful for my wife, Noelle Cooper. We'll be married 30 years in next March. And my two sons, Grant and Ben. You think about it, that at every obituary, that's the last paragraph. And I think that kind of sums it all up, right? Who your family is, and I'm really grateful for that today as a dad.
Love it.
Plenty of other things, but definitely as a dad, that's what I'm grateful for.
No, great answer. I always love starting out gratitude because it just kind of reminds us, it's a kind of a check on mindset, just a check to no matter what we have going on in life, you can always be grateful for something. And what I'm grateful for is the time I have right now with my kids. I got a kid in college who's home, and it's nice having the noise in the house. And I'm grateful for I'm grateful for a mindset of be able to check the ego, and I'm grateful for the ability to when I'm not my best version of me as a dad. I've learned to ask for help, and I've learned to kind of find ways to kind of get back to center. And it's funny interviewing so many fantastic dads. It's like that's the one thing we all have in common. A, we're all dads, and B, we're flawed. We're flawed humans. No one's perfect all the time. And so being able to kind of give myself grace when maybe I'm not my best, but then get back to the center of when I am my best. I'm grateful for that, to be able to not let me go down paths of the scarcity, but more of an abundance of hey, admitting that wasn't the best version of me, but I'm going to get back on track. And so I'm grateful for that. Well, cool. Well, you mentioned briefly, so 30 years of marriage, that's fantastic. But bring us inside the Wolff Huddle. Talk about maybe how you and your wife met, and tell me a little bit about each son.
Yeah. So the Wolff Huddle is, Noelle, Ben and Grant, and Noelle and I met at the University of Michigan. I just graduated from Annapolis, and I was able to get one of the few good deals in the Navy, and they sent me to grad school right away as opposed to doing my time. So I'm getting paid to go to grad school. It's real college, I'm like, wow, this is incredible. We met, her roommate was the president of the Asian Law Students Association. Mine was the president of the Asian Business Students Association. So a pitch for diversity groups, that make big schools small. And we met at that happy hour, and then everybody was splitting up, and so she spent the rest of the night trying to get her friends to go to Rick's, which is a famous Ann Arbor bar. It's still there. I was trying to get my friends to go to Rick's. We finally did that, and that's where we met. Now, I had a girlfriend at the time, and I, had to kind of take care of business. So we didn't talk for another 2 months, and then I called her up and I said, "This is classic. This was when Seinfeld was a big deal." I'm like, and it was on a Monday. I think Seinfeld was on a Thursday, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing Thursday?" She's like, "I don't know. Haven't heard from you in 2 months." And by the way, it's Monday at grad school. That's Thursday's way out there. And I'm like, "You want to watch Seinfeld?" And she's like, "No, that's weird." So we just met at another Ann Arbor bar, and yeah, the rest is history. My oldest is Grant. He's 24. Um, he's an investment banker in Charlotte. He works for the debt capital markets team of U.S. Bank. Learning a lot. Second year out of college. Loves finance, so kind of a chip off the old block. But I gotta say, I had little to do with it. He took an econ class in high school that he just loved, and when it's a good fit. So he's doing well, and great that he's out in the East Coast, experiencing a different culture and environment in Charlotte. My youngest is Ben, and he's a senior at the University of Portland, nursing major, and we've been very blessed. Another great fit. Got his EMT 2 years ago. That's been his summer job. He'll graduate in June, work for a Seattle hospital. I'm sure he'll always have a job, which is great because he needs it, because he spends a lot of money. But he always spends a lot, but he works hard. They both work hard. And then we have a dog. It's an important aspect in the Wolf Huddle. We have a black lab named Lingo. We didn't name him. He was the L litter. My wife watched a documentary on Netflix and always wanted about how guide dogs for the blind become guide dogs. And it's when you see one of those, there's 2.5 years of training into that dog, and a lot of people and money. And so my wife wanted to do that. So we did that for 1.5 years as the puppy raiser. Then he goes off to 6 months of training, but it's a really high bar. It's a 50% pass rate. And so 3 months into it, we got the call. You always get, as the puppy raiser, you get first call, and he career changed, opted for pet as opposed to, and so that's been a lot of work. So we just we have Lingo in the huddle, and he's a big focus of ours. He's a great dog. He knows like 30 commands. He can shut drawers and doors. He didn't get to the semester where they taught opening and pulling, but he can shut. So he's a good guy, and yeah. And at this point, that we're empty nesters, that's pretty much what we do on the weekends is walk him.
So. There we go. Now, as I'm getting older, man, you're getting older when you start talking about the weather more. You start complaining about your vision more, and you start enjoying walks.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm checking all the boxes, Drew.
100%.
It's funny you said smart dogs. Like our dog, we have two. We have a golden retriever Irish setter. They're 50-50. And the older one, Stella, she's like 12. The younger one, Harley, she's like 1.5 years. And this dog is so freaking smart. She knows when she has like a toy that wants to play keep away, and she just loves antagonizing us. And then like usually when I work, it's usually, you can't see her here, but like when I do like Zoom calls or I'm doing coaching work with clients, like I'll say, all right, take it easy, goodbye. And right when I say goodbye, she sprints in. So she knows the word bye means like, I can hang out with dad now. Or if you say the W word, which I won't say because if they hear it, they'll freak out.
Yeah.
But it's fun to just see how smart those animals are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, cool. Well, what was life? I'd love to know, like for you, like to talk about what was life like growing up for you, and talk about the impact your parents had on you now that you're an empty nester, I guess.
Yeah, my parents, my dad was a Boeing engineer in the 70s, and we know what that time was like for Boeing. That's when the sign was up on Aurora Avenue, last person leaving Seattle, turn out the lights. he didn't get laid off, but he was smart enough to see the writing on the wall, and so they thought, oh, what do we do? He bought a hardware store in the middle of Eastern Washington and moved his family to this town of Waterville, which is 900 people on a good day. It's on the Waterville Plateau, so there's no irrigation. This is on Highway 2 on the way to Spokane. It's all wheat farming. It's a terrible place to grow wheat. They get 12 inches of rain per year, and if it doesn't work out, you don't have much of a crop. And so Dad sold hardware to wheat farmers, and Mom was a housewife, although both really well educated. But the poverty line for a family of 5 in 1970 was like 15,000, and Dad made 13. So but I gotta say, it was it was poverty by choice. They were educated. We had books in the house. It's a whole different thing when there's other things out there, and frankly, for the town, we were well off, right? It's all relative. And I didn't realize at the time just how tough farming is, and when kids' dads were home in the day, I didn't realize why they were home during the day. Well, they were on welfare; they didn't have a job. So I remember Waterville as a very kind of it's a dusty, gritty, cold, slushy place in the spring. And I've since been back, and I have a good friend that's a wheat farmer, and I was there this summer, and man, it was so hot. It was like somebody blowing a blow dryer over an ashtray. I was like, I can't believe we lived here. And he's just chugging water, and I'm like, oh. But that to say, so growing up not very well off, but it was, you learn a lot in those kinds of places. Salt of the earth people working for wheat farmers. I was driving. That was my first job besides working for my dad. Was driving wheat truck at age 13. What you do in agriculture environments. But eventually Dad, he went back to, kind of a professional job. So Dad left the home, and I was probably in 6th grade, worked in Spokane briefly, and then went back to Boeing. And then my parents got divorced, kind of split up when I was in 7th grade, and fully divorced kind of 2 years later. So Mom moved us to the town of Kashmir, which is right outside of Wenatchee. Had to get a job. So single parent household. So divorce is part of the story. I got to say, I'm the youngest of 3. By the way, I have an older brother that's 4 years older and an older sister. That didn't really impact me. And I, had love and support from both parents, even though my dad was in Seattle. We had a great relationship. I never felt pressure. Maybe it's because I was the youngest. Never felt pressure. And my older brother is a key figure in my life. He's 4 years older, so kind of like my idol, So yeah, my parents. I guess what did I learn from them? My dad. Well, he never chased money. It's fun to think of, how old your parents were when they did these things, right? Like how old you are now. So Dad moved his whole family, had 3 kids, moved his whole family to this wheat farming town when he was 33, and just, he didn't know anything about running a hardware business and actually did it incredibly well. He really understands the human spirit, and just likes the goodness in people, and does things for the principle of it. Very thoughtful. So yeah, I just, he was never, telling me what to do in sports or anything like that. I was always self-driven. Same with my mom. She was, and mom passed away in 2014. Dad's still alive. He's in Olympia. Mom was probably less of the warm, fuzzy mom, a little more of the drill sergeant. But I felt loved and supported. And what I'd say I got from her was, well, I think you have to be humble and be confident at the same time. I mean, that's part of the dichotomies of life, right? Like, there's always dichotomies on everything. Humility and confidence it's a big one, right? Like, so I definitely got that from her. Like, she'd be like, well, why can't you do it? You can do that. At the same time, if you came home and be like, I'm so smart, I know everything, she'd be like, well, don't let that go to your head. She would be the first to kind of calibrate you. I think because her dad was like that. He was a high school principal, so he had some of that in it. So that's kind of the growing up story and kind of two things I got from my parents.
Did you ever ask your dad, like, so you're a Boeing engineer, how do you find, let's see, it's Waterville. Let's go to Waterville. It sounds like, how do you find Waterville as a Boeing engineer? Like, that is like the most random place. I mean, how did it, I can't imagine.
He's always
that.
An independent spirit. Like, he had, even through his life, he growing up in Seattle, and he just went off to work in the mines in northern Idaho as a college job. And, he really did a lot of things independently. So he did a road trip in our Volkswagen bus and saw this for sale sign. And thought, oh, I could do that. This is a nice town, and it's like, I wouldn't have done it. I would have been too risk averse, and so what I would say, thinking about Dad, it's funny. So with your mom, you get love and support, and I'm going to quote this book I read. The author of this book I read, which is called "Shit Your Dad Says." Highly recommend it.
Shit Your Dad Says.
Shit Your Dad Says. It's hilarious.
I love that.
He wrote it was a blog piece. It didn't even make the book, but I remember this. And he told this anecdote of his dad was telling him this story. Like, and he was a farm kid, and he had an accident and almost, his arm almost got chopped off. And he was telling the story how they went to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, I can cut his arm off and make sure, we could definitely save him. Or we could just take a risk and see what happens. And his dad's like, let's take a risk. He's like, gosh, Dad, I'm sorry. That's a really tough story. He's like, are you kidding me? I'm so thankful for my dad. There's not a lot of, life isn't great for a one-armed farmer. and the moral of the story is that you take what you need from your dad. You get love and support from your mom, but you take what you need from your dad. Even people that have dad issues or whatever. And I can think of, I'm like, that's true. There's certain things about being a man and a dad that, like, yep, I got that from dad. Everything else, I'm good. He's good. So I think that I definitely think about that a lot.
How old is your dad?
He's 87. He lives in Olympia. He did remarry, when I was, in college, but my stepmother is also a part of the huddle and just an amazing woman. Big part of my life. She's younger. But they kind of take care of each other. She's had MS since she was 19, and she's 72 now. And just the most resilient, positive, graceful person I've ever met, actually. And so, they're in Olympia. They're in kind of a large assisted living, kind of multiple stages of living place. Dad broke his ankle this summer. He's, had a stress fracture in his back, and he's, but he's chugging along and in great shape. So, and completely, mentally just completely locked on. So
That's awesome. I hope when I get that age, I'm still mentally there. My dad unfortunately passed away at right before he turned 80, back in 2021, and uh, for shoot in his 50s and 60s, maybe mainly 60s, just like had a rap sheet of health issues, kind of kept going down bad paths, and I ended up taking care of him essentially from like 23, me and my wife, till he passed away, and it was a really tough journey, but one that I learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about how strong my marriage was, because Carrie, my wife, like when you hear about the phrase, till the vows to death do you apart and sickness and health, like she signed up for all those. And so so I always tell people, when you got old, just as much as your parents probably trigger us at times and frustrate us sometimes, just like I'm going to probably do to my kids one day. They're alive and be grateful for it. And so I think that's cool. Your pops is still chugging along. And I love to hear the story about your stepmom. She sounds like a fantastic woman. I'm curious. You mentioned you took some things from your dad, like ooh, I got that from my dad. Like, tell me what comes to mind. Like, what are the maybe one or two things you took from your dad that really impacted you as you raised your boys?
yeah, he was always thoughtful to recognize key moments, and just said the appropriate thing at the right time, which is a skill. And so plenty of times, when I think back to those moments, and I'll think back and I would have plowed right through the moment, right? But I'll remember that Dad said something, I don't know, my graduation, or just key moments. And so frequently, and I find myself pretty much even in my day job, as a C-suite, you're frequently put on the spot, right? Like, Drew, say something. uh, and I find myself just quoting Dad. I find myself just repeating things that he had said to me, or he had said. He just had a great way with words and capturing the lesson in things, and the human spirit and goodness, that was people focused. So yeah, I frequently end up just repeating, and I'll repeat what Dad said, and I won't even think about it.
What might be an example of one of those key moments that, like, we talk about this, that like flashes you back? What, if you feel like comfortable sharing?
Well, I remember, definitely graduations. But before the big dinner or whatever, right? He sent me a kind of a one paragraph letter in, the last semester of my senior year in college. If definitely funerals, but even when the family's together, and there's maybe some relatives that haven't been there in a while, or you have. I've had family members that have struggled with parts of their lives, and um, we'll get everybody together, and sometimes it's busy and there's family, and he'll just ding his glass and say, "I'd just like to say a few words." and to then acknowledge somebody that's pulled their life together or something, right, in the moment. It would have been easy not to. So frequently at Thanksgivings, Dad did something like that. So yeah, I think those are a couple of examples.
When did you start? When did you start appreciating that?
Yeah, it goes in phases. That's why with my boys, I'm kind of like, hey, the story's not done yet. You got to appreciate the whole story, the full arc. Yeah. We're only like part of the way through the arc, right? And so I do. It's a key part of becoming everybody remembers. There's key moments in your life where the moment you realize your parents were flawed individuals, flawed, broken people just like you are.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. You're like, and you move on, and then you realize, oh, you have to extend them grace. And then you start to appreciate, gosh, I can't believe they did that. And there's probably a 10-year gap. So probably late 20s.
Yeah.
You just really start to mature and look back, and probably in your teens is when you realize your parents are flawed people, and it takes that kind of time.
Mm. You mentioned your brother's your idol. Tell me why.
I'm gonna give verklempt, like,
Yeah, it's okay.
even before I start.
Yeah.
Not we're a lot alike. We sound alike, we look alike, and we were so in a small town. Like, I don't know, he's just a good guy, and um, definitely looked out for me. And it's funny, when I went to the Naval Academy, um, my parents didn't want me to go, right? Like, and for good reason. Like, hey, think about this. I didn't know what I was doing. I wish I could say I had this grand plan. Um, I just thought, well, it's a ticket out of Kashmir, and it's a good job. Once I got there, I realized what I was doing. But so actually, my brother dropped me off in Annapolis. Like, he's 22, I'm 18. We slept at the Econo Lodge. Everybody else's whole family's there, right? Like, and so that's an example. Or basically any kind of big thing that happened in my life. Who told me my parents were getting divorced? My brother did. Who told me when somebody died? My brother did. So, and in terms of taking care of parents too, it's we've backed each other up on things. So with my mom, for example, we partnered, and that's really powerful. It really strengthens your spine when you're not alone, and you didn't have, you did a lot yourself, but I had a partner in it, and we tag teamed. Maybe I was the on-site kid, and he took over mom's finances, right? Like, we're doing the same with dad. So yeah, we're tight. We can go a month and not talk. We text a lot, but you know, um, he's just he's always been there for me. So yeah, definitely a key person,
That's
and plays
awesome.
a role different than dad, right? Like, it's a blessing to have an older brother.
So Kashmir, the Eastern Washington, for those that don't know, the pride of Haley Van Lith, great basketball player
Yeah.
from Kashmir. Um, when did you what do you remember what triggered you to feel like, you know what? Yeah, let's go to the Naval Academy. Why not? Like, was it because you want to be a pilot? Did you want to get into maybe tell me what was the drive or curiosity behind that?
None of that. Um, well, good and bad. I had a lot of my identity in being an achiever. Like, my parents were divorced, single parent household. Um, I'm just like, I'm gonna do more and be more, right? And since then I've realized, okay, that could also be a recipe. At the point you fail, then who are you, right? Like, but at the time, I wanted to be the best I could be, right? Like, so I thought I was bulletproof. And so, uh, and it was kind of a fluke, I just started applying to schools, and it was all across the board. I didn't have good coaching on that, like, private liberal arts schools. And then I just applied to the Naval Academy. And when I got in, it was really just for the honor of it. Somebody said, oh, Naval Academy, that's hard. That's hard. I'm like, okay, I'm in. That's what I want. I went because it was hard. Um,
Yeah,
uh, and you should go for different reasons than that. That's what I coach people. Like, when I do alumni interviews, you'll get the kids. It'll be like, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a pilot. And I'm like, okay, maybe. But more importantly, like, what if you don't get that? What if you're in Fallujah and you got to go over the berm with your Marines? How do you feel about that? And some kids will be like, oh, that's what we're talking about, going to war, and then some kids will be like, no, that's what I want to do. I want to lead Marines, right? Like, and you're like, you're going to the right place. So I figured that out a little bit later on, but that's how I ended up there.
Wow. As you think back to either your brother or your mom or your dad, tell me what were like, as you and your wife were raising your boys, tell me what were like the core values that were super important to you guys as you raise your boys, that were like, these are like non-negotiables. Our boys are going to be really good at A, B, and C.
Well, that's a good question. Strategy is what happens at our, what's the I'm going to screw up the quote, but you have a strategy and then it all falls apart, right? So I think we had aspirational goals. Our two boys are completely different, and they're 2 years apart. And when the oldest we had biologically, the second one we said, oh, let's adopt. And I say that because it's his story, and he would tell anybody that he was adopted from Russia. But it's also part of my story, and so I just mention it to other parents. How that's normal, people do this. But so they're just completely different. And the youngest is high energy, ADHD. The oldest is introverted, and so it's just oil and water always growing up. So I think we had this grand plan of nice quiet family, and and it was pretty chaotic, and they never really got along after the age of 7, and since then they've started, now they're older, they're starting to get along a little more. So at one point, for example, you hear dads that have the Wadley principles. Shout out to Dan Wadley. We had Wolff principles. It was framed. Yeah, it was pretty cool. They rejected that so fast. Those guys are hard chargers. They're independent. It was like pushing on a rope. I guess what I learned was like, hey, I don't care as long as you think for yourself, and you're considerate and thoughtful, and you look out for people that need your help, and you use your skills. You don't waste them. All of that, right? So you could try to go at it one way, the ideal way, or you could just see it kind of happen. And I would say we were more of that. Yeah.
What so interesting. When did you and your wife decide that the adoption was the route you wanted to do?
We just we had talked about it, and there was no big moment. We investigated it following our first son, and thought, oh, there's a lot of kids in the world, and of course, then they say it's a weird question, like, where do you want to adopt from? Because they're all country based. Biggest need was in Russia at the time, so it's one of those things. It's funny. You think you're in control, and you're really not, right? You think you have this grand plan, but there's an inversion, and more. You end up being more blessed than you think, right? Like, and it is amazing to think of fatherhood. What is fatherhood, right? Like, and what's that definition? And having somebody hand you a kid, in Swedish hospital, and I was holding Grant's little oxygen mask, and you look at that kid in the eye, and you're like, you're my son. Or being in the Vladivostok, Russia, in the Russian Far East, and orphanage, and somebody hands you a kid, and he looks up at you, and you're like, you're my kid, right? Like, both ways are something amazing and magical, that's what fatherhood is. It's not biological, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you guys got Ben, did you actually fly to Russia and went and?
Yeah, 2 trips.
Oh, wow.
It was 2 trips, 4 weeks apart. Grant, our oldest, was 2, or no, he was 3, I guess. So Just amazing people involved all on the way. Stayed at a hotel run by a Canadian. Just incredible people involved, with this orphanage, Russian court system. The judge really did her job and grilled us. Just so it's an amazing process. But I'll never forget. We're talking about how great we are. We're Americans. We have these resources. And then she had a trick question in the middle at the end of the hearing. She's like, well, this one's kind of sickly. Do you want to? Because he was born at 31 weeks, birth weight of 3.5 pounds. So at age 10 months, he looked like a newborn.
Wow.
And in Russia, step one is they put him on barbiturates. So step one is to wean the baby off of barbiturates. So she's like, sure don't want to get another one? I'm like, niet. This is my son, right? Like, but I appreciate what the judge was doing. Was like, you're not just, you've already bonded with this kid, right? Like, so it was real. I was just really impressed with the goodness of humanity in that whole process. And
Wow.
and Grant, our oldest, was part of it, right? He's making friends and Russian kids, and it was a lot of time that we were there. So
How long was the full process of from start to finish?
3-4 months, kind of 5 months of vetting and court stuff, and then 3 or 4 months to get a referral and 2 trips. Yeah, probably a year all in.
Wow. I know well, the one gentleman's going to come to mind. I got him, John Ruffini. Shout out to John, who is a former guest on the podcast. I don't know if you by chance had a chance to listen to that one, but he wrote a book called A Quest for Alex. And since you've been through this process, I think it might be something to check out. So they actually end up adopting 3 family members. They're all related, and him and his wife adopted them. And so they got the brother, sister, and then Alex. They weren't sure what was going to happen, and it tells a story of almost not getting Alex and getting Alex, and it was like, I'm like, oh my God, I can't. And I've not read the book yet, John. I will read it though, because I'm finishing another book, but I cannot wait to I've heard him tell the story, but like, since you've been through it, it might be of interest to you, because how he tells the story and how just the things he had to think about. John's a leader in a talent development and a recruiting company in the East Coast. And I think just his ability to be inquisitive and ask questions kind of helped him through the process of the courts and understanding and what those things. But I'm always, it's funny I'd be willing to bet the perspective you have from a diversity perspective, and just seeing different cultures and seeing different parts of the world. Maybe talk about that experience, and how did that experience shape you as a father?
Because when we lived in London, so I did European banking, and then the job I was in, I worked in Africa. We had subsidiaries in continental Europe and London, and then at Starbucks I was also in an international role. It was, looking back, it was we had the opportunity to move to London, and then the boys were 3 and 5 at the time, and what a blessing. And we kind of knew it at the time, like, and plus it's an English speaking country. Like, oh, what a great opportunity. Shout out to my wife. Like, I interviewed, got an offer, and had to be there within like 5 weeks. we rented the house, sold a bunch of stuff, got everybody packed, got the cars placed, landed, found a place to live, all in 5 weeks. And she did all that with 2 little boys. But it's exactly what you'd think. Just even living in London, the perspective. So we lived there for 4, and I worked there for 6. And the boys, by the time we moved back, they were 8 and 10. But it's incredible to see how that perspective is planted. Like they don't remember a ton about it, but they just know there's a world outside the United States, and that they can appreciate different viewpoints, not all from a U.S. centric. And it plays out in things they say and do now. We've since returned as a family a couple times. It's pretty hilarious to see these American kids at the time, teenagers, roll into London and be like, "London, my town," Hey, mate. And we are kind of Anglophiles. We do like British stuff. They still break out the British words for stuff every now and then, because that was kind of where they grew up. So bin and posh, and there's some really good words that we just don't have in the American version of English. So,
what's the translation on those?
Well, posh is somebody that's a little like formal and kind of upper class, but speaks with a probably a forced high accent. Well, bin is a garbage can.
Oh, there we go, bin. I was like, I think I was overthinking it.
Loo is a good word. I gotta take a trip to the loo. I'll frequently say I'm chuffed to bits, and people say what? But it's very descriptive. I'm chuffed.
That's good. Every time I think of vacation, or I think of Europe, or my mind, just because I'm very random and a little bit bizarre, Drew, I think of the Griswolds, and I think of one of my favorite one-liners that I love doing on an airplane is from the one and only Clark W. Griswold, when he's on the European, and the flight attendant goes, "Hey, what can I get you a drink?" "Oh, a Coke." "Do you want that in the can?" And he turns around and looks, "No, how about right here?" And every time, and so actually I try to pull that on the flights, and my son's like, "God, you're such a tool." But then he laughs. I'm like, "Then don't laugh, because you're encouraging me, because it's funny." And
there was a moment when I was quoting 80s and even early 90s movies when at that moment nobody knew what I was talking about, and that's when you're officially over a certain age.
Yeah. Well, there's some fantastic movies in the 80s that should still be quoted. Like,
yeah, they hold up.
They do. One of my buddies in college said to Jaycox, if there was not 80s movies, you would not be funny. And I appreciate that, dude.
Yeah.
As you have, two boys that are, I would say, thriving. They got one's working, one's going to be graduating. What was the hardest part of your journey as a dad that might speak to a dad at home going through something?
I would say, when you're parents, you may be coming from different places. You have different models of parenting. That is so crucial. And that was probably our biggest struggle, is that my wife and I weren't always on the same page. It's like how to handle stuff, right? Like, and that can be really hard. So now that we're empty nesters, but the great thing is, and that's marriage, right? To become one, and it's just a huge mystery. And if I think back to what I would have done and the ways my wife helped me mellow out a little, and vice versa, me with her, like the end result was way better than either of us could have produced on our own. But there were moments where we were just not on the same page, and we didn't have a lot of harmony between the two. And there's some tough family vacations and stuff, but yeah, and that's what I would tell anybody getting married, is really start to and have discussions about that. And we were both working at the time, so luckily, and commuting from Bainbridge Island on the ferry, but that in a way that also worked out, is that and my wife did this. We were able to find grandmothers that just wanted to work a little part time. So from 3 to 6, we had about 3 different grandmothers that helped us out at various phases. And so having somebody other than you giving life lessons to your kids, and also for boys, really important for them to raise their game. And so my wife went back to work at just the right time. So that all worked out. But yeah, we definitely struggled between ourselves, but figured it out for sure. It's funny though, now that it's just the two of us and we're empty nesters, right? Like, and sometimes you worry about what are we going to talk about if we don't talk about the kids or we're not going to. We actually get along great when it's just the two of us. Like, there's no, like we have a blast. It's just when you introduce a third and fourth person in there that are strong-willed, that was always a struggle. But I guess that's the point, is communication, and that you make each other better, and you have different models of what good parenting is.
That's really good, dude. I one of the best pieces of advice I got in my life was right from my first job at a school, and my boss, he asked me a question. He goes, Casey, do you want to be right or do you want to get what you want? I go, I'm on both. He's like, you can't. He's like, all right, well, I'm like, oh, okay. And I go, well, I think I want to get what I want. He's like, good answer. Because if you just said you want to be right, that tells me you got some serious ego issues. And I've actually applied that life lesson in like all the relationships I have, specifically in marriage. I think I've been married 25 years. And sometimes we want to be right so bad, but at what cost? Right. And I think that dads, if as you listen to Drew and I talk about this, like there isn't always your way, and there's always a better way. And I think there's always multiple levels of what you're doing and what's your job. There's probably 7 or 8 people that are way better than you out there. And and that's why I think I mentioned before we start recording today, every episode I feel like I do, Drew, I get like free dad therapy and just like more self-reflection on maybe I'm not the person, whatever the person you are today. Well, the good news about it is tomorrow's a new day, and you can make the change. Or if you're not the best person in that hour, great. There's another hour. Change, make a choice. And don't be a victim of your own story. Don't be a victim of your own circumstances, but make the choice to get better. And I hope that as dads listen to what we talk about in these shows, you kind of take time. You hope you take notes. Like I get a full page in front of me and really kind of have that self-reflection of who do I want to be? Who do I want my kids to want to be? How do I want to respond when you get triggered for whatever it is? Like why? Like maybe try to find out why. So I love the stuff you shared. It's making me think about a lot. And one of the questions I always like asking dads too is an area of their dad game that maybe now that you got empty nest, but an area of your dad game as you reflect back, like I probably didn't handle that the best. And if I could go back in time and handle that differently now that I got more years on it. Maybe if you feel like sharing an example, like for me, I have to work hard, Drew, on my patience because I'm a really competitive person. And my dad was crazy impatient, and he could drop the best GD bombs at me. God damn it, Casey. And it would make us laugh. It's funny, but I don't know why, but which would make him more mad. I'm like, well, stop swearing at me. But is there an area that as you reflect back that a story might come to mind of a situation how you handled that maybe we can impact a younger dad that might be listening that say like, well, I don't want to make that same mistake.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar. Do you want to be right, or do you want to get what you want? A device I use in a work setting is to fast forward to the end and ask people, well, how does this end? Whether they're bringing you some issue or whatever, how does this end? And it's a great tool, right? And you'll be like, well, I'm going to yell at so-and-so, they're going to yell at me, and then we're going to meet, and then we're going to figure it out. And I should have done that myself at times, I would have, of course, yeah, I wouldn't have reacted as strongly as I did to things. I think that I could have used some, more of that. Just which my dad was a lot like that. He was super patient. He never, took things to 11. And I could have softened my response, I think. So just fast forward to the end. Okay, you're gonna learn a hard lesson here. You're gonna um, uh, which is always hard, but
Yeah.
I was much more of that. I was like, oh, let them fail. And I was probably way too much that way, right? Like, and my wife was like, oh, I can't let them fail, and
Yeah.
I think I should have then skated to where the puck was going to be and be like, okay, let's figure out a way through this. And I would just kind of, I would be impatient like most dads, right? Like,
Try
so
to
that,
fix.
yeah, definitely.
That's a good one. I wrote that down. How does this end? I circled that. That's a great question. It's just because in the end, we don't like show up to work or show up to our relationships like, man, I can't wait to frustrate that person and really piss her off. That's my
Yeah,
goal. I hope she hates me and I hope we get in this huge argument and then I hope we don't talk for 2 days and then we'll make up. That'll be, I mean, no one wants to go through that, right? In theory, we're looking for harmony, great relationships, but that's how we build our resilience and grit and fortitude. And yeah, you got to go through those sometimes tough times. And it's funny, like opposites, like your wife was maybe like you guys, how you were, well, let them fail. And no, don't like, it's probably that's good to probably have both perspectives
yeah.
because you kind of balance each other a little bit. And if you have two people that are, overly protective, and then the kid's gonna, turn into the Todd Marinovich of the world. You know, no offense, Todd, if you're listening. Actually, I think rest in peace. I think he passed away. Sorry about that, Todd. Yeah, but I think that's a really good way to say it and a really good way to ask it. And as dads, you're thinking about like, what is our another dad I interviewed? He said, what's your end game? What's your outcome you want? And sometimes we get so wrapped up into the now and the emotion of it that you lose track of what am I really mad about again?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
Um, okay. So if we were to summarize what we've talked about today and, wrap up everything we've talked about that dads can maybe take from learning about you, learning about your story, that they can take to more like a theme, like 2 or 3 actionable tasks that they can say, man, I learned a lot from Casey and Drew today. And these are things I can take into my own life to become maybe a better version of me or a better version of my dad life. Tell me what comes to mind.
I would say I've learned to invert, that things are usually the inverse of what you think. Whether it's, um, you think you need to take charge and be a dad and tell people what to do, and what you really need to do is give your kids control and help them become individuals, right? Like, so it's outside in thinking, same as like jumping to the end and thinking back to the whole arc. Uh, I would say it is amazing to me that kids just grow up. Like, time is your friend, and there were times when I was like, how does this work out? I don't know how this works out. And then literally 3 years later, you're like, wow, this guy has grown up to be a man, and he's a good guy.
Mm,
Both kids, like, and that was just time, right? So
yeah.
don't overreact. Um, and of course, uh, another one that I think about a lot is 80% of life is just showing up. Um, you don't have to have it solved. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to give the best advice at the exact right time all the time at all.
Yeah.
All you have to do is show up. And that's amazing how powerful that is. And not literally not just for every sporting match, or whatever. In fact, I think people over-index on that. I never wanted my parents at my sporting matches, like, but just showing up emotionally
Mm,
at the right time, whether it is a sporting match or not. Like, and I always felt my parents did that, even though divorced or, so I think that's a powerful thing. It applies in professional life, as well as personal life.
that's a good one, man. I love I love the self reminder of just showing up and don't overreact. I mean, I think we see that a lot in youth sports in today, where Johnny's going to be the next
Yeah.
tennis player to play Wimbledon. No, he's not. He sucks.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was lucky enough to, this is Uncle Rico moment. I was lucky enough to play football in college, and I know what it takes. I know what it took for me to squeeze every ounce of athletic ability out of my body, and the hard work and extra hours. And so, we're lucky. My son, he's playing golf in college right now, and he's worked his ass off. My daughter's a high school basketball player. She wants to play in college. Um, and one thing I worry about is I don't want them to think like, if you decide not to do that, that's okay. And like, I've constantly have to remind myself, like, success for me is when people say, man, Ryder's, what a great kid. He shows up on time. God, he had a great handshake. He was so nice. He asked really good questions. Like the people they want. And sometimes I find myself like, if, my daughter has a good night or a bad night, like, you're not going to make every shot you shoot. But you can control your body language. You can control your energy on the bench. You can control how you compete. Like, and just, I want to continue just to remind myself, celebrate those and make sure she understands, celebrate those. And like, even in golf, like, you're going to hook one out of bounds and probably drop an F-bomb on accident. Okay. Well, celebrate just that you're outside and you're in nature and you're breathing, and you're walking, you get exercise, and you get to play this sport, and be grateful for that. Like, don't be so outcome focused. And it's easier said than done, because business world, we are outcome focused.
Yeah. The key is that your identity isn't that thing, because when that thing doesn't work out, and it will, like, you're going to be knocked flat. You are somebody else other than that, whether it's your job, even as a dad, if that's your identity. If your kids have issues, it doesn't mean you're worthless, or as an athlete or whatever. And that gives you, something more to, who you are.
Well, I think like when football ended for me, it was harder on my dad than it was on me. And I remember when I got done, I remember like for like a day, I mean, like maybe I actually went to the bar with my buddy, my coach, and my wife, now girlfriend at the time. And I remember I was like, man, I'm done playing football. And I remember it just like hit me, and I'd like up sobbed for like 30 minutes. Like I think everything, just realizing it was over. And then going through that kind of helped me when I left K-Force, because I spent 20 years there, right guy, right time, right place. But when I go and speak, just like I joke with you guys, they didn't go out of business when I left. We are all replaceable. And I think that is another reminder for us dads is, what I didn't say in the beginning, what I like saying now is, I'll say now is, whether you're an executive at BECU, or you're a pro football player, or you're a janitor, or you're a head of marketing, our kids really don't care.
Yeah.
Right. We think they do sometimes, because we're like proud of what we do, and you should be, but like, remind yourself, like, your kids, what they care about is how are we showing, like, to your point, how are you showing up? Are you there to support them? Are you there to love them? Are you there, and so, anyway, man, this has been fun. Learning about you. If people want to connect with you, if they want to learn more about BECU and the great things you and your team are doing, what's the best way people can maybe they want to come work for the bank? Like, tell us what's the best way people can learn more about what you and your team are doing?
I mean, well, connecting with me, LinkedIn, and yeah, what BECU is up to, obviously all of our social channels and things like that. And I can't emphasize enough, we're a not-for-profit financial cooperative that's member owned, which is an incredible way to bank. Actually, it makes a ton of sense. People pooling their money essentially, and lending it out to other people. And it's, and we spend a lot of time as management it's a high bar. It's even a higher bar than having shareholders, frankly, because this is folks' money. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how can we get return back to our members? How can we give them their money back? I don't know when the last time you felt like your bank was doing that. And we have the luxury we can really think long term. We don't have to meet quarterly earnings. So it is a fantastic place, fantastic management team, and so I just encourage people to investigate, BECU, both job or for your checking account, or other ways you can partner with us in the community.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure that's linked in the show notes. And as someone who has seen the culture of BECU, that they do this thing event in the fall. I think it's in the fall. It's the Day of Giving, and seeing the energy of thousands of people and genuine, like, people liked each other. Everybody. It was actually really, really cool to see. And because in corporate America, that's not always the way.
Not always the case. Yeah.
And you've seen it worldwide. And so I would encourage you to kind of to check them out if you are looking for a new banking option, or if you are looking, maybe you're that job change and you want to go check them out. I have multiple friends that work there. Shout out Dan Wally, Dan Gibbons, shout out, and then the old one and only Shane Dodge, shout out to. We'll get those on the podcast. But all right, Drew. Well, now it's time to go into the lightning round, and this is where I'm going to show you the negative hits of taking too many hits in college, not bong hits, but football hits. And your job is to answer these questions as quickly as you can. My job is to get a giggle out of you. Are you ready? That
Definitely.
First laugh does not count. Okay. True or false, you made the very first applet and cutlet in Kashmir?
False.
False. Okay. True or false, you own the Kashmir high school record for most consecutive hook shots made from half court?
False.
False. Okay. True or false, when you leave BECU, you will go back to Waterville to be the mayor?
False.
Okay, that's a tight laugh. I laughed at my own joke. If I came to the Wolff house tonight, what would we have for dinner?
Leftovers. Fish and chips.
Well, that sounds good. If we went and karaoke right now, what would be your first song you'd do?
Staying Alive.
Wow. Would you wear leather pants?
White jeans. It's the only song I got.
Nice. Well, we might need to make this. You might have some range then. That's impressive.
No, it's not, but I'll still sing it anyways.
Okay, what would be one song that if I went into your phone right now and we listened to, that would surprise the people you work with that you listen to?
John Coltrane. Yeah, I love Supreme, that album. Okay. We wouldn't expect. I'm typically, 90s dad rock or yacht rock, or I appreciate a lot of different forms, but yeah, I probably wouldn't think I'd have jazz in my playlist.
There we go. If you were to go on vacation right now with the whole family, you're empty nesters, but we're bringing the family back together. Tell me where we're going.
We're going to Turtle Island, Fiji. Island in Northwest Fiji. It's got like 11 huts on it. It's a resort that an American built out of a labor of love, but just an incredible place.
You've been there?
And I say that because that's where we went for our 25th wedding anniversary. And we're going back for 30. They got us on the returner plan. So that's currently on my mind, but I'd recommend it to anybody.
Turtle. Okay. I'm writing that down, everybody. Because we want to go bad over there to the huts thing. That's just like that's a dream for us to do. And we will do it one day. Tell me the last book you read.
Let's see. Power Failure about GE. I'm reading like 3 all at once. The Snowball about, Warren Buffett's story, and Range. I'm halfway through that.
Okay. If there was to be a book written about your life, tell me the title.
Just Show Up.
Boom. Love it. Okay. Now, Just Show Up. No one can get a copy of it because it's selling out fast. Amazon can't keep it on the shelves. Barnes & Noble can't keep it on the shelves. Every airport. This thing is flying out, Drew. And so now Hollywood's found out about it. They're going to make a movie about it. You're the casting director. I need to know who's going to star you in this critically acclaimed hit new movie on Netflix.
Kevin Costner.
Saul?
I've just heard that all my, my wife will crack up, but he he did the movie No Way Out. Even when I was at the Naval Academy, I was walking around in summer white. Some tourist was like, "Hey, that guy looks like Kevin Costner." So I got that going for me,
which is nice.
Which is nice.
Well, Caddyshack there. There we go.
Caddyshack. Okay.
Yep, I love it. Okay, and then last question. Tell me 2 words that would describe your wife.
Funny and wicked smart.
Hyphenated.
In my best Ben Affleck, Good Will Hunting, wicked smart.
Wicked smart, huh? Awesome. Lightning round's over. We both laughed. I'm going to give you the win because I laugh more at my own jokes, which I tend to do as a corny dad. But this has been fun. I love what I love about this journey as a podcaster for dads. I end up learning about so many cool stories, and I would have never known that from the Navy to the Waterville to the adoption to your brother to everything. I think it's just such a cool story, and I really appreciate just the vulnerability, the honesty, the stories you shared, the lessons that we can hopefully apply in our own life, the dad wisdom, which I have a page full of notes, and I want to say I'm grateful for you. And to everybody who continues to listen and support us on Quarterback Dadcast, I'm honored, I'm humbled. We have episodes booked all the way into next year. This year, everybody. And if this episode has touched you for every reason, the biggest two biggest asks: either take time to leave a review wherever you consume your podcast, or share the episode with another dad. Because my goal is to keep this thing going as long as I can. And you never know, maybe eventually my son will take this thing over for me when I'm in the assisted living facility doing wheelies in my wheelchair. But joking aside, Drew, thank you again so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I wish you the best in 2025.
Thank you. Grateful to be here.